If you are a United States citizen, there is a comfortable assumption most people carry without ever questioning it. Citizenship feels permanent. It feels settled. It feels like something that cannot be touched once granted. For decades, that belief has been reinforced by routine, habit, and silence. People vote, travel, work, and live their lives without ever wondering whether their citizenship status itself could come under review. But that sense of permanence is exactly what makes the current moment so different, and for many Americans, so dangerous. Because while most people were focused on elections, inflation, and international conflicts, Congress quietly approved a series of changes that fundamentally alter how citizenship is monitored, verified, and enforced in the United States. These changes were not introduced with dramatic press conferences or urgent public warnings. They were folded into broader legislative packages, committee decisions, and regulatory updates that received little attention outside policy circles. On the surface, they appear technical, administrative, even boring. But taken together, they represent a shift away from passive recognition of citizenship toward active verification. And that shift matters, because once citizenship moves from being assumed to being checked, the burden quietly transfers from the government to the individual. That is the line we are approaching. What makes this moment especially unsettling is not that citizenship is suddenly being revoked en masse. It is that the rules governing how citizenship is evaluated, documented, and confirmed are changing in ways that most people do not understand yet. These are not changes that announce themselves loudly. They show up as requests for documentation, as system flags, as delays, as reviews, and by the time someone realizes what is happening, they are often already inside a process that is difficult, expensive, and emotionally draining to escape. The approval of these changes reflects a broader transformation in how the federal government manages identity. For years, agencies operated in silos, each holding fragments of information that were rarely synchronized in real time. That fragmentation created flexibility and, in some cases, leniency. Discrepancies existed, but they were rarely pursued aggressively. That era is ending. Congress has authorized deeper data integration across federal systems, allowing information related to citizenship, immigration history, travel records, tax filings, and even state-level documentation to be compared continuously. When systems talk to each other, inconsistencies become visible, and visibility changes enforcement. For naturalized citizens, this shift carries particular weight. Many people completed their citizenship process years or even decades ago, under rules and standards that no longer exist. Documents were issued by hand, records were stored physically, and digital backups were inconsistent or incomplete. Minor errors that once went unnoticed can surface automatically. A name spelled differently on an old form. A date that does not perfectly match across databases, a missing update that was never required at the time. None of these issues meant much in the past. Under the new framework, they can trigger reviews. Native-born citizens are not exempt from this reality either. Citizenship may be granted by birth, but it is proven through documentation. Birth certificates, social security records, passports, and state IDs are now increasingly interconnected. Congress has approved measures that strengthen verification requirements across these systems, particularly when benefits are accessed, passports renewed, or federal services requested. The assumption that one document is enough is quietly disappearing. In its place is a layered verification environment where discrepancies are flagged automatically. What ties all of this together is a change in posture. Historically, citizenship was treated as a settled fact unless challenged for extraordinary reasons. The new approach treats citizenship as a status that must remain continuously verifiable. That does not mean most people will lose their citizenship, but it does mean more people will be asked to prove it, clarify it, or resolve questions about it. And that process is not always quick or forgiving. Congressional approval of these measures was driven by a mix of concerns: election integrity, national security, fraud prevention, administrative efficiency. Each justification sounds reasonable on its own, but policy does not operate in isolation. When safeguards are expanded without equally expanding public awareness and support systems, the burden falls unevenly. People with clean records, complete paperwork, and stable documentation will move through the system with little friction. People without those advantages may find themselves stuck. One of the most significant consequences of these changes is psychological. Citizenship anxiety is not something most Americans are accustomed to feeling. Yet uncertainty spreads once systems begin issuing questions instead of confirmations. A delayed passport renewal, a request for additional evidence, a notice that uses words like review instead of approval. These moments create stress not because citizenship is gone, but because its security suddenly feels conditional. This is where contrast becomes important. The old system was reactive. The new system is proactive. The old system relied on human discretion. The new system relies on automated cross-checks. The old system tolerated minor inconsistencies. The new system highlights them. None of this happens overnight, and that is precisely why it is effective. Gradual change attracts less resistance. By the time people realize the rules have shifted, they are already living under them. Another factor that cannot be ignored is timing. These changes are arriving during a period of economic pressure, bureaucratic backlogs, and political polarization. Government agencies are under strain. Processing times are longer. Errors are harder to resolve. When verification demands increase in an environment already stretched thin, delays and complications multiply. The most important thing to understand right is that none of this is theoretical. The systems are being built, the standards are being updated. Citizenship is no longer just a status you have. It is a status that must align cleanly across systems that communicate with each other. Awareness is the only buffer. People who understand what is changing can check their records, update their documents, and correct inconsistencies before they become problems. People who assume nothing has changed often discover otherwise at the worst possible moment. This shift is underway. What Congress approved does not operate as a single dramatic switch. It operates as a sequence of adjustments that quietly reshape how citizenship is experienced in daily life. The second layer of this shift is procedural. It focuses less on who is a citizen and more on how citizenship is demonstrated, maintained, and validated over time. This distinction matters because procedure is where most people encounter friction, not in courts, not in headlines, but in forms, systems, deadlines, and requests that arrive unexpectedly. One of the most significant changes involves how citizenship documentation is evaluated across federal agencies. For years, different departments accepted different standards. A passport might be enough in one context, a birth certificate in another, a naturalization certificate in another. Congress has now approved tighter alignment, meaning documents are no longer evaluated in isolation. They are compared against one another. When one record does not match another, the system does not assume error. It assumes inconsistency, and inconsistency invites review. This affects people in subtle ways. A woman who changed her name after marriage but never updated an old record. A man whose birth certificate was amended decades later due to clerical correction. A naturalized citizen whose original paperwork reflects outdated country names or administrative codes. Under the old system, these issues rarely surfaced unless someone was already under scrutiny. Under the new system, they surface automatically during routine interactions. Another approved change involves expanded use of conditional verification. Instead of confirming citizenship once and moving on, agencies now reserve the ability to re-verify when certain triggers occur. Applying for federal benefits, renewing a passport, sponsoring a family member. Even correcting unrelated records can prompt a review cascade. This does not mean denial. It means delay. It means additional proof. It means time. Time is the hidden cost most people underestimate. When citizenship questions arise, there is no instant resolution. Files are transferred, Requests are generated. Human review follows automated flags. Meanwhile, life continues. Travel plans wait. Employment paperwork stalls. Benefits are paused. The stress does not come from losing citizenship, but from having it temporarily placed in question. Congress also approved broader authority for agencies to request supplemental evidence when records are incomplete or unclear. This evidence can include historical documents that are difficult to obtain, especially for older citizens or those born abroad. Consular records, archived immigration files, court documents. For people who assumed their citizenship process was finished long ago, these requests feel jarring. They reopen chapters that were believed closed. There is also a cultural shift embedded in these changes. The language used by agencies is evolving. Words like verification, review, and compliance appear more frequently than confirmation or approval. This signals a mindset change. Citizenship is no longer treated as a static identity, but as a status that must remain aligned with evolving systems. Most people will never encounter serious consequences from this shift, but many will encounter inconvenience, uncertainty, and delay. Another critical aspect is how appeals and corrections are handled. Congress authorized streamlined enforcement, but did not equally streamline resolution. When automated systems flag an issue, reversing that flag often requires manual intervention. Manual intervention requires staffing. Staffing is limited. This creates bottlenecks. For the individual caught inside one, the experience feels disproportionate. A minor discrepancy can produce months of uncertainty. The emotional toll of this process should not be underestimated. Citizenship is tied to belonging, stability, and identity. When paperwork interrupts that sense of security, even temporarily, it creates anxiety. People begin questioning past decisions. Did I file everything correctly? Did I keep the right copies? Did I respond to that notice years ago? These questions spiral quickly when clear answers are hard to find. What makes these changes especially effective is that they rely on normalization. Once verification becomes routine, resistance fades. People adapt, they gather documents, they comply. Over time, the idea that citizenship might be periodically reviewed no longer feels extraordinary. That is how structural change becomes permanent, not through confrontation but through repetition. There is also an equity dimension that deserves attention. People with access to legal help, organized records, and flexible schedules navigate this environment more easily. People without those resources struggle. Congress acknowledged this disparity in debate but proceeded anyway, prioritizing system integrity over individual convenience. That trade-off is now baked into policy. The takeaway is not panic, it is preparation. Understanding that citizenship is entering a more actively managed phase allows people to respond intelligently. Reviewing records, aligning documentation, updating outdated information. These steps reduce exposure. Ignoring the shift increases it. The system does not announce when it is about to check. It simply checks. And when it does, readiness determines outcome. The final layer of these changes is where everything converges, and it is also where the consequences become most real. Up to this point, the shift may sound abstract, procedural, even manageable. But when verification, data integration, and conditional review operate together, they change the lived experience of citizenship in ways that are easy to underestimate until they happen personally. This is the phase Congress understood well, even if it was not emphasized publicly. It is the phase where systems stop being background infrastructure and start shaping outcomes. At this stage, citizenship is no longer challenged directly. Instead, access is conditioned. Access to travel, access to benefits, access to sponsorship rights, access to timely approvals. When systems detect inconsistencies, they do not revoke status outright. They slow it, they pause it, they complicate it, and for most people, that distinction makes little difference in practice. A delayed passport can cancel a trip. A stalled benefit can strain a household. A suspended application can disrupt family plans for years. One of the most significant risks moving forward is assumption. Many citizens believe that because they have lived quietly, paid taxes, and followed the rules, they are insulated from review. But these systems are indifferent to intent. They are built to compare data, not to infer good faith. When discrepancies appear, the system does not ask why. It asks for resolution. And resolution almost always requires action from the individual, not the agency. Congressional approval also expanded information sharing with state and local systems. This matters because state-level records are often messier than federal ones. Variations in formatting, record-keeping standards, and update timelines create mismatches that did not matter before. Now they do. A state record that was never fully digitized. A local amendment that was never transmitted. These gaps surface when systems synchronize. Another underappreciated element is how these changes interact with life events: marriage, divorce, name changes, relocation, international travel. Each event generates paperwork. Each update introduces the possibility of inconsistency. The more complex a person's life history, the more data points exist, and the more opportunities there are for systems to flag differences. This does not mean complexity is a liability. It means it requires attention. There is also a generational component. Older citizens often rely on documents issued decades ago. Younger citizens assume digital systems are accurate by default. Both assumptions can be risky. Older records may not align with modern databases. Digital records may propagate errors quickly across systems. Trusting that everything is correct without checking is increasingly risky in an environment built on continuous verification. What separates manageable inconvenience from serious disruption is timing. When people discover issues during calm periods, they can address them methodically. When issues surface during deadlines, travel windows, or benefit renewals, stress multiplies. Congress did not create this pressure intentionally, but it accepted it as collateral. The system prioritizes accuracy and enforcement efficiency over individual comfort. This is where contrast framing becomes unavoidable. In the past, citizenship felt like a settled foundation. In the future, it functions more like an account that must stay balanced. Small discrepancies do not always cause immediate harm, but they accumulate attention. Eventually, they demand resolution. Ignoring them does not make them disappear. It increases the chance they surface at the worst possible moment. None of this means citizenship is fragile. It means the process surrounding it is becoming stricter. The difference matters. Panic helps no one. Awareness helps everyone. People who understand this shift can act calmly. They can gather documents. They can reconcile records. They can correct errors before systems force the issue. People who dismiss the changes as irrelevant often discover their relevance too late. Congress has signaled clearly that this is not the end point. These approvals establish a framework, not a finish line. As data improves, systems will become more precise. As compliance increases, expectations will rise. Citizenship management will continue moving toward automation and continuous verification. This is not unique to the United States. It reflects a global trend. But scale and complexity make the U.S. version particularly impactful. The most important decision facing citizens now is not political. It is practical. Whether to assume stability or to verify it. Whether to wait for questions or to eliminate them. Whether to treat citizenship as something that simply exists or something that must align cleanly across systems that increasingly communicate without human discretion. When February deadlines, renewal cycles, or benefit reviews arrive, the system will not ask what you believed. It will check what is recorded. That is the reality Congress approved. Preparation does not mean fear. It means control. And in a system built on verification, control belongs to those who act before the process acts on them.